Sajati, thank you for presenting MOFA in a different way, in a way that we had not seen before. And for all you, everyone, that entire presentation that Sajati gave was also made on AI completely. So, without further ado, so Creative Collab, MOFA through AI and computation design. Can somebody play that video? These 3,000 images were generated in Midjourney in 12 minutes. That's the power of AI. But much before the AI, MOFA has a lot more sort of layers to it. How we started, let's start from the very beginning. We didn't start with technology. We came to technology because there was a need to do it. The need was, of course, one was, I'm a little lazy. I don't like to work very hard. I like to work smart. Number two, we wanted to keep the firm lesser number of people. And we wanted to create a more technology-driven firm where a lot of work is taken care of by the machines. So we started using our own algorithms, our own computational techniques, our own way of relooking at how architecture could be made simpler in terms of its construction. It doesn't have to be simple in terms of its layering. It could be complex based on the site conditions. But in order to build in the environments that we were building, it had to be made extremely simple, like a child's play, that anybody on site could build our complex projects. So we had to break it down. That's a 20-year journey of MOFA. Of course, it is a series of layers that get added, and the latest layers being artificial intelligence for last 2 years, coding, algorithms, and I will come to even a project where we've not even drawn a single line, and the entire project and the design has been developed only using an Excel sheet. But more on that. Let's start with the first project, NIFT Kangra. This is a competition we had won when we were a young firm, and this is a very dear project to me for two reasons. It does not use technology to its level that we are using it today. It was still in its nascent stages when we designed it. And it uses my principles, and Oyon will relate to it if he's still there and if he's not run away after giving introduction, is Anant Raj's Light Studio, the Light Cube Studio. We were lucky to be taught by people like Professor Raje, Professor Doshi, Leo Pereira, I think, and we all picked up, we imbibed these sort of principles or theories of how they used to teach us. So NIFT as a campus in Kangra, I'm only going to talk about the residential part of it today, this is the site when we started. It's a good 50-degree slope, and there were more than 40 to 50 mango and banyan trees on the site. One resolve we started was we will never cut the trees or even touch the branches of the tree. We will build this entire hostel or the student housing around these trees. So we mapped the entire site, contoured it, and for the first time, we mapped even the trees, the girth of the trees, the branching of the trees, and the complex growth of every tree out there, creating a sort of a prediction pattern of how that tree is going to grow tomorrow after 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, and build a design that will grow with that tree. So this is where, right from the mapping of the trees, we divided the entire site into a grid. And this is where Professor Raja's exercise comes into play. It's a grid of 3 meter by 3 meter, the light cubes. And those light cubes become these open courtyards, balconies, open spaces, whereas the livable spaces are more of this sort of an organic built up. So we didn't want to cut the hill. We used the contouring of the terrain of the hill as it is. And we built these cubes or these blocks, which are almost reminiscent of a Himachal village where the streets go at various levels. There's not even a single house at one level. We did not do terracing like it's done in the hills, but we made it in a way that every block, every room sits on its respective contour level, respecting the tree around it, respecting the water levels, the water flow. Everything remains the way it was before we built out here. The resultant was this. We have this entire hostel, which is a lot of open spaces, a lot of contemplative spaces under the trees where the students, the designers, they sit, they have their impromptu workshops. And these non-program spaces are those spaces which have become the life of the project today. Every room is at a different level. We also tried roof gardens. Of course, it's not the best way to do things, so it was an experimental project. Another project, NIFT, this is a resort we've done in Manali, in Nagar. It's a site which is pristine, beautiful. It's on the hill, overlooking the valley. And when we got this site, we didn't want to construct anything out here. We said it'll be a crime to build a G+3 or a G+4 concrete building. So we should do a project which just grows out of the land. A project that just grows like an anthill and the nature eventually takes over it. It grows over the project in a way that the project just merges with the natural landscape. So that's the first sketch, inspired from an anthill, how the anthills are growing from the ground and they just, only the heads pop out. Of course, the idea is very simple in a sketch, but it was crazy to build something like this. 6 individual pods, almost like origamic paper, as if you folded, crushed the paper and thrown it. And that became the form. With these skylights, with these eyes into the sky, where you get the views of the valley and the trees from everywhere inside these pods. Yes, thing to be noted is, for a project of this scale, at that time, we made about 20 models, 500 plus drawings, and 100 iterations. And there's a reason why I'm saying this. That's the project today, after the construction. I'm not going to go into the details of the construction because most of this construction happened off-site. We did the steel fabricated frames in Delhi, took them as prefabricated units, did ferrocementing on top, and we built this. By that time, we hadn't evolved to a point where we can do an entire building in a factory. But this was a start, and it's an important turning point for the firm where we built the structure or the skeletal in a factory and we took it as a prefab and we sort of built over it. Working drawings were crazy for this project. The interns who worked on this project probably are building rockets at MIT today because it was a crazy set of drawings. Sajati showed a video of the same project. Each and every junction, each and every glass junction, joineries was detailed, worked out not only in a 3D model, but also in the form of drawings. Small video. The interiors are done by the client. There's a lot of local craftsmen. There's a lot of local craft interpreted in a modern way. And this project became a way of life for us. It's not just architecture. Right from the local produce to whatever gets served at the restaurant there, it's a way of life. Coming to our major breakthrough project, the National Institute of Water Sports in Goa. This project got over last December, and it took 10 years to build. We won this project as a competition. When we entered the competition, we were a young firm, and the incentive for us was, well, there are 5 international firms who are competing in this project. We are never going to win it anyways, so we'll get a chance to at least take a holiday in Goa. And that was the only incentive. Trust me, we were not even interested in getting the project. The competition results came. The idea that we worked out was, it's a National Institute of Water Sports. It's not something that you want to sit in a classroom and study. You want to be out there in the sea. You're an adventure sports player who wants to be trained in the sea. So the whole building needs to reflect that dynamism, that movement, that there's no pause in the building anywhere. Your eye, your perspectives are always shifting. And taking that idea of the sea, where a surfer is sort of entrapped within these waves of the sea, and there's a sort of a fight or a tension between the surfer and the sea, taking that whole tension, we built paper models which represented the waves of the sea. These are the initial studies that we did in order to visualize how the folded nature of the waves work. The first model which translated into the concept. And this was our competition entry, which we had given. To our surprise, we won the competition. And the first reaction was, oh shit, we'll have to build it now. It's no longer a visualization. We have to build it. From there was a series of research into how to make it possible in the lowest government budgets, because it's a government building, to be built on L1 contract. And if you all understand what an L1 contract is, we had to make it happen. This was the first series of iteration where the roof was broken down, and we call it the morphological optimization, which means the shape of the roof in terms of its structure, in terms of the steel that is going to go in, has to be so optimized that it fits into the budgets. The skeleton has to be clean and clear. The streamlined roof had to be designed in a way that we could make it into smaller modules, because the contractor hadn't quoted for using of cranes or any mechanical means. Very clearly he said, I'm only going to do manual welding on site. That's it. So I'm not going to build it in a factory and bring it and lift it up with cranes, which was a huge pause into the project in that time, because we had not ever imagined this fact that such a huge roof, we'll have to break it down into smaller modules. So the topological optimization, where even the skylights, the amount of sunlight coming inside every room was pre-calculated. So what you see is the quantum of those blue squares increasing and decreasing based on the space that it's serving below it. The fabrication analysis and optimization. Now we came to a dead end at this point where we said we can't build a roof like this without cranes. How the hell are we going to get the XYZ coordinates? Because it's a shape which is in all directions. We broke it down into smaller modules, but yet the issue was, how do you actually build it? And my dad was a great storyteller. When I was a kid, he used to tell me stories of Mahabharata, Ramayana, all sorts of mythological stories. And suddenly a picture flashed in my head of Bhishma Pitama lying down on a bed of arrows. There was a lot of waste reinforcement on site. And those reinforcements, we built a small platform of 5 meter by 5 meter. And we started using those waste reinforcements as props, small tack welding props, which gave us the Z-axis. Every module was built on that 5 meter by 5 meter platform in the form of these modules propped over waste reinforcements. It's almost an image of Bhishma lying on the bed of arrows. So slowly the roof came about in small kit of parts, lifted manually by hand, and joined and welded on site. Mind you, the drawings were built in the office. The fabrication drawings were done in the office for this, because the contractor refused to do fabrication drawings and get it checked by us. So it was impossible for us to do these drawings had we not written an algorithm code for it. So we wrote a code for it, and we were able to generate more than 5,000 drawings in a matter of 2 weeks. Very precise drawings, every junction, every module, it showed how we can build a roof like this. Then came the roofing panels, the entire inventory of it. There are more than 6,000 panels of different shapes and sizes. That's just one sheet. There are 40 such sheets of different panels. They had to be constructed. Somehow we convinced the contractor that, boss, itna aage tak aa gaye hain, thoda aur kar lo, thoda sa. The whole project has been series of negotiations. Thoda sa aur kar lo. So this is a simple folding of paper. We did paper exercise of origami, where we used the simple color-coded sheets, the metal sheets used for the factories, and we sort of wrote an algorithm that a CNC machine could cut, bend, and fold the panel in a shape like a hat. And each of these panels were then done in a local factory in Nasik and brought to Goa. We also did series of simulations because a classroom can be noisy. And we didn't want to break the classroom down with walls. So we did a series of these simulations, acoustic, water, sunlight, heat. This is an acoustic simulation where sound emanating from one classroom, how it needs to be controlled using acoustic panels designed in a certain way. That's the photograph of the classroom today. Each of those acoustic panels and that shape that you see between the classroom cuts the sound from one classroom to another without breaking the whole classroom down in parts. That's finished photographs, clicked 3 months ago. You can see the roof panels and the skylights. It has a 50-meter Olympic-sized diving pool. This is where we saved resources for the government because we combined a diving pool and a racing pool together in a single section. So not only we saved more than 5 lakh liters of water, but we also saved a huge chunk of cost by combining the two pools into one single entity. The entrance through a bridge. I'm going to play a small movie inside spaces. Please be patient. Thank you. The point to be noted here is we made 200 models, 100 iterations, 50 simulations, and more than 5,000 drawings. We were sick of making drawings by the end of this project because it was endless. Teams and teams like Army were coming and creating more and more drawings, and the drawings was an endless process. And this made us realize one thing, that we can't go on like this. If we have to do projects, we cannot keep doing these models and iterations and drawings endlessly. We have to find a method which is much easier, faster, to translate in the office and on the site. We had done this installation about 10 years ago. It was a very simple installation. We wanted to create a small hill, like a hillock. The reminiscent or the idea was, as kids, we used to go in the ruins of Delhi, Purana Kila chale gaye, kabhi Tughlaqabad Fort chale gaye, and have impromptu picnics. So there were these ruins with broken walls, with greens and grass growing over like mounds, very organically. We want to replicate that same idea as part of India Design ID in 2014 in an open site. So from here, from this hillock, we devised two cubes, twisted inside-outside space, and we said we will build it using shipping pallets. Because shipping pallets is something which is a recyclable material, it's a waste material, and we will just stack them in a way that they create this form and shape. Of course, believe me, by the end of the project, it was about 2 weeks project, I knew all the kabadis of Delhi on my phone. They would call me and say, sir, और pallet चाहिए. मैं कहा मैं बन गया जो बनना था, अब मैं घर नहीं बना रहा हूँ. So I know if anybody wants shipping pallets or wants to know kabadis, I have 50 numbers on my phone. So point of the matter, this is what it was. For this project, we did not build a single drawing. The entire project was done using an Excel sheet, where we were just giving layers and layers of plan with a shift in the X and the Y axis for every layer. And two people from the office moved around with these Excel sheets, just guiding the people on site that place this pallet here, move 3 inches left, 2 inches right. And this sparked off a new thinking for us. In a matter of 5 days, we were able to put together something like this, grow grass, and it became a space which was enjoyed by everybody out there for about 3 days. It was a temporary installation. We did another installation 3 years after this, in 2017. And these installations have always been sparking of newer ideas for us. This time, we thought, Commonwealth had just happened, and there were a lot of trees that were cut rampantly for Commonwealth. So as a tribute to the cut trees, we said, let's build a landscape which is representing the stubs of the cut trees. Sometimes when you cut the tree, you don't cut it from the root because it's too expensive to uproot it. So you just cut it halfway, take the wood away, and the stubs remain as a reminder, as an ugly reminder to that city that the tree has been cut. So we said, let's build that on that idea. We'll build an entire landscape which will be dotted with 8 major trees of Delhi, from Champa to Bargat to People, and what those stubs represent. A series of clay models were done to understand the form. And from those clay models, we arrived at the final abstracted forms of each and every tree, from Champa to Gulmohar to People in Pilkhan. These are all major trees of Delhi, which are there. We built the internal rib structure, but the covering of it we hadn't figured out yet. And we wanted to use another waste material, which is metal sheets, sort of scrap metal, which gets thrown out. So the idea was that we will take the scrap metal, but we had not figured out how we would cover it or clad it. And this was thrown open to the people who were fabricating it, the fabricators. There were about 40 of them. Each one came with their own ideas. And one person came up and said, let's cut it into 1-inch strips. So we sent it out, the scrap sheets, got them cut in 1 inch strips, and they started weaving. So each team with 3 or 4 fabricators and welders started to weave their own structures with using tack welding technique and started to make the form started appearing. That's when I realized we write algorithms. But algorithms are what? It's a manifestation of a human brain, of a single brain. When you take a craftsman, you take his thinking, which is an age old thinking, and that age old thinking is an algorithm in itself. So the moment you have 50 craftsmen working, you literally have 50 algorithms running along with your algorithm on the computer. You combine the two together, you get wonderful results like these. You can map them. So we were able to build structures which are going 9 meter high, 8 meters high, stable structures, and this thin metal sheet, the way they had woven and tack welded it, the structures became so strong that when we dismantled and removed the internal rib structures, the thin shell still remained at the lowest cost possible. Not a single drawing built again, all structures done without drawing a single line. You can see the details of the tack welding. We left it as it is. This is people. So each of the stubs has a different pattern which appeared. Some beautiful patterns inside, light coming inside the large structure. Sorry. So the number reduces. 2 models, 8 iterations, 0 simulations, 2 drawings, literally, to build complex forms like this. And we thought we were arriving at something better, better and better and better. During COVID, we got an opportunity to design this house. It's not a house, it's a machine. We did not interact with the client for 6 months during COVID, and the entire designing happened in a virtual space. So on our VR set, I'm sitting with one VR headset and the client another VR headset. We designed the entire house walking virtually through that space. The idea in this house was simple, that we wanted to create a basement which is flooded with sunlight, so much so that you can grow a tree inside. So we wrote an algorithm and we did a reverse calculation of generating a plan. That's where generative architecture comes in. We said the house should be able to get light on one spot in that house for 3 hours every day, irrespective of summer and winters. We wrote a code for it. We ran that code, and in one night we got 27,000 iterations. We ran the code once again, adding some functions to it. From that 27,000 iterations, we were able to zero it down to 30 iterations. And those 30 iterations, we put another factor into it, ran the code again, and the factor you won't believe was Vastu. We added the Vastu factor, and those 30 iterations came down to 3 iterations. And those 3 options were then given to the client to choose from. So it's a reverse calculation of a plan, and that's where the plan got generated. The whole house is being built using prefabricated steel. We decided that we will not do a construction on site because Delhi, with its pollution norms, over construction, concrete structures, is just a crazy carbon footprint. So we'll optimize the steel, use minimal steel. It'll all be built in a factory as kit of parts and will be not bolted on site. So the only concrete that has been done is the basement substructure. Those are the light simulations throughout the house, the real-time simulation, and we were able to predict it to so close that I told the client, and it was a joke between us, that on 25th of December at 10:05 in the morning, at this spot, you put your chair and you'll get the same light pattern. And we checked it. We got exactly the same lighting pattern as what we had predicted. So what I'm trying to say is that the algorithms, the technology, the weave of technology was getting closer and closer to more reality. We were able to predict the behavior. So that's the client and me. Literally, that's not literally how it is, but just imagine that that's how the scene was. We used to sit for 3-4 hours every day designing the space in a virtual space. A detailed 3D model was built, including the structural model. detailed renders in terms of understanding materials, lighting, textures, the structural system with its nut and bolt. Everything was sorted out in the form of a model which could go down from file to factory and get prefabricated and built. So every nut and bolt is there in the form of the model. To this, we also, so these are the parts coming from the factory, getting assembled on site, and the whole house is getting built using prefabricated system. Today, 80% of our projects are prefab. 20% are client choice because they still think that steel is unsafe. So we say, okay, next house, we'll do it in steel. So and this house has a swimming pool on the second floor, which is 5 feet depth. It's a 50 feet by 10 feet of space without a single column and very thin beams with air conditioning ducts passing through them. We also built a detailed digital model to a level that the client can cut a section at any point, understand services, each and every service is modeled into it. So what we call a digital twin. And in this, combined with automation, the health of the house can be monitored at any point. So the client has a detailed model at any point where there is a problem, it can be located just by cutting a section, understanding the basic, what has gone inside. It's like a human body with its scans, with clear scans, and you can know what is happening to the health of the building all the time. Another project, Goa Bazaar, a craft bazaar we're doing in Goa. It's an encouragement to us in terms of taking this idea forward, where we said we will not do any construction, especially for government buildings or public institutional buildings. It's a public space, 5-acre land, and we wanted to represent what Goa is, what the old streets of Goa are, what is the architecture of Goa, the colors, the organic streets, how that can be replicated in a language that is prefabricated steel. We decided that we'll do the entire project using 260 recycled shipping containers, the upcycled shipping containers. So the whole project has been designed, tendered, and now the construction starting, where 95% of the project is just shipping containers. Only the concrete platforms on site are done in situ. That's the overall vision. Every shipping module, we have detailed it out in terms of its itinerary. It's in terms of its inventory, how the windows, how the railings, every small part is like a kit of part which can be assembled in a factory within the 100-kilometer radius of the site, brought to the site and fixed using cranes. So that's a shop module, how it will get assembled. Going to the block assembly. Only the plinth beams in concrete and all the other containers, shop modules to food modules to toilet modules, each, including the railings, they come as prefab elements and they come and get assembled on site. That's the whole plan. So the whole project, including the roof, which are modular roof systems, are made in the factory and using cranes put onto the site. A detailed inventory of the kind of spaces that are built from 20 feet and 40 feet containers down to the kit of parts. Every window, every jharoka, every railing has been detailed out as a small kit. Imagine yourself like building a Lego, but building a Lego in reality. So almost negligible carbon footprint on site, no pollution, and we can start the landscape from day one. The overall assembly. We're also doing a rainwater collection pond in the center, which will collect rainwater for throughout the year for the project. We need acoustic simulation for the space to check. Sorry, my bad. So that's the food court, the shops, overall assembly. That's the vision. The streets of Goa replicated using containers, local laterite. AI, big subject, big debate. Have been a lot of debates or talks where the senior architects have told me, get out. You're not an architect. You don't draw lines anymore. You just use Excel sheets, and now you've come up with this whole AI thing. You keep doing this to us all the time. So a lot of conferences, I have to so this whole image was generated as a sarcasm. to something that what AI can do, you cannot imagine. You cannot imagine Gandhi sitting in McDonald's having Pepsi and eating French fries. But hyperrealism, this was the first few experiments we did using Midjourney. What is a digital impact? Sajati talked about communication, social media. But what is a digital impact on an architectural practice? How do you talk about it? What is a practice? You communicate. You build portfolios, website, PR, packaging, awards, paid publication. That also happens, by the way. And you have other side, which is the academic side. There's another side to the practice, which is the build side, which is somewhere where you say you have to think about ROIs, you have to talk about investments, you have to talk about, forget the theoretical side of it. How much profit is the project building? That's also another side of it. On the brink of this lies publication and awards. Does it? Does it not? But then there's another entity, just social media. It's unstoppable, it's fearless, it's an omissive lie, and it's a new reality. When I say omissive lie, it's the story of Ashwathama. Does anybody know what is the story of Ashwathama in Mahabharata? Anyone? Yeah, Ashwathama mara gaya. Ashwathama was an elephant that got killed, and it was perceived that Ashwathama, who was Drona's son, has been killed, and that's how Drona dies. Social media is the lie of Ashwathama in a lot of cases. Yes, Sajati looks at me with her scowling eyes, but yes, it is. You can omit certain facts. You can play around with the images. Today, what is happening across the world in terms of politics, in terms of moving things, it's an omissive lie. It's not really a lie, but you just remove certain details, add some more details. Why am I talking about it? We did an experiment to build a project doing this concept. There's so much of digital consumerism at that fast pace. You're bombarded with millions and millions of images. You're scrolling through reels, you're scrolling through photographs. Everybody's on social media is addicted to about 3 to 4 hours per day. The amount of data that you're taking in on an everyday basis, you're living in a sort of simulated reality. It's not really the reality. On the other hand, when they say that there's so much of data that's being bombarded, you become digitally neutral. There's a digital neutrality. So the younger generation, when you say the alpha generation, even the Gen Z for that matter, they've come to a stage of digital neutrality where you're discarding a lot of notions and you're looking at sort of algorithmic way of thinking. You're creating reels that works for the algorithm. You're repackaging histories. The old movies, the old songs are being repackaged and put together. So it's a sort of a paradoxical stage. The reality has become a myth, and the myth has become the reality. So you don't know. You're actually living in a matrix already. Beautiful photograph of a burger. I love it. No photographer could create it. AI can. And it talks about Umberto Eco's very famous statement. And anybody who reads Umberto Eco, he's one of my favorite writers. And he talked about how media influences people and vice versa. People influence the media. It's what you create, it's what comes out. We did sort of an experiment on the same thing. What if a burger was just made as a dessert? What would it look like? And there could be series and series of such experiments that can be done. But what is a food experience today? With Zomato, Swiggy, what is it? It's designed, it's curated, it's a culinary experience. It's controlled by the aggregators, by influencers and social media. And it's funded by private investors and not food lovers, mind you. There was a time when food was run by people who loved food. A lot of restaurants were run by chefs, dhaba owners who were just plain serving a food experience. But today, it's not just the food experience. In the center of it lies media, all of it, because it's a simulated reality. What you're eating today outside, in a lot of cases, is something that you want to post on a social media. And a lot of influencers may or may not like that food. That food sometimes is really bad. I've tried it. But it's presented in a way that 200 more people rush to that same place to eat the same pizza because somebody has talked about it. Nobody accepts pizza as a bad thing. I mean, it could be any food for that matter, biryani, food, whatever. Influencers put it together in a way. I mean, our social media feeds are filled with it. So we got to design a restaurant. And we said, let's use this idea. Let's create simulated reality. Let's create the food experience. Let's bring positivity to it. Let's build a happy food place. Where the food, I'm not going to go into the commenting of the food, but my job is to design a space for it. How do you design a perfect space where every point in that restaurant becomes a perfect selfie point? Every background is a point of view. We gave our reference to Wes Anderson, and anybody who's a fan of Wes Anderson knows that he makes these picture perfect frames in every movies. Beautiful colors, pastel shades, perfect lighting, everything's perfect in those movies. So we said, why don't we design a restaurant which is based on the picture perfectness of Wes Anderson? Wherever you sit, the background would be a beautiful background to click, and you can post it online. So from that restaurant, you could generate 30,000 images. Interesting idea. How do you do it? We collected images of Delhi, hundreds and hundreds of images of Delhi, colors, arches, architecture. We also collected images from Wes Anderson movies, French Dispatch, Darjeeling Unlimited, all the movies that Wes Anderson has done where similar colors are used. These images, we mixed them up in Midjourney. We shook them up. It's like throwing thousands of images together and say, just create a fusion. So we got hundreds and hundreds of such images, which were a mix representing old Delhi, but not Delhi, in the form of how Wes Anderson would have imagined Delhi. These were the first experiments. From there, we went on to more refinement of the prompts, and more refinements gave us clearer spaces. And the first design came out. This is the design of the restaurant, which it is like a street. It's a kitschy collection of frames. It's like a movie set, but it's not a movie set. That's the render, and that's the photograph of the completed project. It's a train, but not really a train. It gives you a feel of that, but it's not really that. So it's a sort of a mixed reality of some sort. It's a kund or an amphitheater, but not really an amphitheater. A small movie. This movie is still work in progress.
Master speaking. Welcome to Life Express. People come together, people make friends, and people part. Welcome aboard.
We did the movie in Wes Anderson style, just to reinforce the idea for fun. All the actors are from The Office.
Where the streets follow a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to that overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it, but let us go and make our visit.
This is still work in progress. The final movie looks slightly different. It's still in editing stage. Coming to my final project of the day, where it's a mix of AI, computation, and not a single line drawn till now. It's a recreational center we're doing in Bangalore, a sports and recreational center, where from the program, the Excel sheet of the program, we developed a mother and child relationship for every function. For example, salon is connected to creche. Salon becomes mother function, creche becomes a kid function. Toilets to lobby, they are mother and child relationship. Based on this relationship, we wrote a code. We wrote an algorithm. It's something which the bees and the ants in the real world, in the animal world do. They build spaces based on mother and child relationship. And they create hierarchies. These spaces are based on that. It's an interrelationship diagram of that. Now, the moment you change the function, the hierarchy of that function and the area of that function, the form and the structure of the space changes. So this is a simulation of how the form is changing. We combine that with the Voronoi model. So the Voronoi structures are the most stable structures. Your soap bubbles are Voronoi structures. So we said each of these forms are tightly bound together in a Voronoi situation, but based on the function or the area or the hierarchy that they're sitting in. The initial model, it's going to be 3D printed, by the way. This is the first 3D printed project of the country, where to visualize it, so this is how the whole thing will be constructed in built-in layers. Thankfully, no working drawings will have to be made for something like this again. And the detailed visualization of the same thing simultaneously is being done using AI. So that's an AI render generated in about 15 seconds. So every time we change the form, simultaneously the render is created for a visualization. Interior spaces renders, how the spaces could look like, are all done using AI. This is a project where we have not used CAD even once. Coming to the summation of everything together, MOFA starts with a functional sketch or a model or clay models. The process remains the same. We use the intuitive process. We don't believe that it's only the machines that do the job. We believe in a cobotic relationship where it's humans and machine come together and they explore the world of design. We translate that into a digital modeling and iterative process, optimization of shapes, forms, algorithmic thinking, how one shape could be optimized and resolved into more buildable forms. Analysis, which is daylight, solar radiation, everything is done to every project, all analysis. In fact, pedestrian analysis. For a public project, we do pedestrian analysis, imagining scenarios and making 10,000 people walk through that space. What is the route that they're going to take? What are the potential spots? What are the pause points? What are the shortest distances? Based on that, we are able to predict what space could become a cafe, what could become a green space. The landscape patterns, everything is predicted using pedestrian analysis. Environmental analysis, water analysis, flow of water on the site. What is the natural flow so that we don't disturb it, so that it becomes the most sustainable way of building. We don't block the waterways, but we let them grow. Structural analysis, which is done initially within the office itself before it goes to the structural engineer's office, so that the challenging forms and the structures, we already have an idea that where and how we can reinforce it. And data retrievals and drawing notations, how drawings could be created for the site using an automated process where it can go into either a CNC cutting machine, bending machine, milling machine, or a 3D printer. This you already saw. So it's a closed loop system, starts from inspiration, resolution, manifestation, and translation. And this closed loop is what MOFA is today. So computing is not about computers anymore, it's about living. Thank you.